Lesson 10 Practice. Partitioning shapes into fractions. Do the problems with me. Pause or rewind if you need to. Okay, our directions at the top say, do the shapes in problem 1A show halves or thirds? So right away I'm asking myself, what does halves mean? Halves means that it is in two equal groups. So I know what halves means. And then it says, or thirds. What does thirds mean? Thirds, remember, means groups of three, or equal groups of three. So I'm going to look at these shapes here, and I'm asking myself, are they in groups of two, or do they show three equal shares? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So all of those shapes in 1A show halves. So on this line here, I am going to spell out the word halves. A, O, V, S. Halves. And that is all. And then it says, here for A, draw one more line to partition each shape into fourths. So now I'm asking myself, what does partition mean again? Partition means to divide, or we're going to split this shape into another set of equal shares. Now it wants us to divide each shape into fourths. We just noticed that all of these shapes are divided into half, and now we've got to take that into fourths. So now I want to make these into 4 equal pieces, because that's what fourths means. So 1, 2, I've got to add one more line to this to make it fourths. And remember, we want each share to be an equal size. If it's not an equal size, then it will be wrong. So to do that, I am going to draw a straight line across my rectangle here to give me 4 equal shares. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I want to do the same thing to my circle here. There's a line drawn straight down, so now if I draw a straight line across right in the middle of my circle, that will show me 1, 2, 3, 4 equal shares of my circle. Now this one's a little tricky. I've got my rectangle here, and the line was drawn diagonally across it to create 2 equal groups. So to create 4 equal groups, we're going to draw another diagonal way going across the rectangle that way. So now you'll see, I'll make this other line darker. So now you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 equal groups there. And they did the same thing with our circle here. They drew the line diagonally, but even if I turn my paper like this, then that will kind of show me the line drawn vertically, or, straight down, and I can make the line go straight across just by turning my paper. When I turn my paper right back side up, it kind of looks like an X, doesn't it? But I've got 4 equal shares there. So you are cutting or partitioning your shapes into fourths, or 4 equal pieces. Let's take a look at problem 2 here. Problem 2, read the directions with me. It says, partition each rectangle into thirds. Shade the shapes as indicated. So the first set of my directions says to partition each rectangle into thirds. So the first thing that I want to do before I shade anything is partition these rectangles into thirds. So 3 equal shares. I'm going to do it going down because that's the easiest way for me to draw it. If you want to do horizontal, you can do horizontal. I'm going to do vertical. So I'm going to do 1, 2 lines going down. And you've got to make sure that you have got 3 equal shares. So I'm going to draw 2 lines going down, 1, and try, maybe you could do like 1 finger in between each, so that way you make sure they're equal. So if I put my finger here, and I put my finger here, and I put my finger here, I see they're all the same size. So maybe you could try to do that. Maybe you and your partner could do those together to make sure you have equal shares. Okay. So now that I have my rectangles partitioned into thirds, now I want to follow the second step of directions, which was to shade the shapes as indicated. So right below it, it tells you how many you want to shade in. It says 3/3. So I want to shade in 3 of them. So 1, 2, and 3. Wow, 3/3 is equivalent or the same thing as my whole rectangle. The one in the middle, down at the bottom, it says 2/3. So you only want to shade in 2 of those equal shares. So I'm going to shade in 1, 2. And my third one here says you're just going to shade in 1/3. So here I only want to shade in 1 equal share. So here you have 3 different fractions. You've got 3/3 over here, you've got 2/3 in the middle, and you've got 1/3. Let's see what number 3 says. Number 3, read the directions with me, says partition each circle into fourths, then shade the shape as indicated. So you're doing the same thing, but now you're doing fourths instead of thirds, and you're doing it with a circle instead of rectangles. So I'm going to draw my line, start in the middle, go straight down, and then I'll do one straight across to make fourths. I'm going to go straight down and straight across. Now this is the only way to do fourths with your circle. You can't do, the lines all going down or the lines all going across. You have to make like a big plus sign in the middle of your circle. Do your very best to make sure they're equal, but if they're not perfect, that's okay. So I've got all my circles partitioned into 4 equal parts. Now we've got to shade them in. 4/4. So you want to shade in 4 of those fourths. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 4/4. That is equivalent or the same thing as 1 whole. Let's see what the second one says. It says shade in 3/4. So now I want to only shade in 3. 1, 2, and 3. So that's what 3/4 looks like. Now I want to shade in 2/4. 1, 2. 2/4. Wow, that kind of looks really similar to 1/2. It looks really similar because 2/4 and 1/2 are the same thing, the same amount. Let's take a look at this one. It says 1/4. Now I only want to shade in 1 out of those. So here I've got 4/4 or 1 whole, 3/4, 2/4 or 1/2, and 1/4. Check over your work with your partner right now and make sure you two have the same thing and are working together neatly. If you flip your paper over, let's take a look at what we need to do here. It says, partition and shade the following shapes as indicated. Each rectangle or circle is 1 whole. So now we're going to be shading things a lot differently. A says you want to make this 1/4. So 4th is that word that tells you what you need to partition your shape into to make those equal shares. So because it says 4th, I need to make 4 equal shares. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. And I can use my finger to see if those are equal. You know what? Those don't look very equal, so I'm going to try again. Remember, when you do fourths, you can start by starting in the middle and make that half mark. Now if I go over and do this, and in the middle there, that looks a lot better. So now I've got 4 equal shares, so there's the fourths. And that number before it tells you how many you want to shade in. So now I want to shade in one of those shares. B says 1/3. 1/3. So the first thing I have to do is I've got to make this circle into 3 equal shares. Now this is a really, really tricky one to do. What you're going to want to do is you're going to kind of want to find the center part here. And you're going to go down to that center, and then you're going to go out to one side, just like that. Pick up your pencil, go back to the middle, and go out the other way. It looks like a peace sign if you have ever seen one of those before. If it doesn't look perfect, that's okay. I know that you're doing your best. Now, I've got 3 equal or almost equal shares there, and you're going to want to shade in one of those thirds. That is the fraction 1/3. For C, it says 1, and then it says the word half. So I'm looking at that word half there, and I have to think about how many equal shares half tells me to do. Half tells me to do 2 equal shares. So I've got to split this square here in half. I'm going to go across to do that. Half. Now, I know that's kind of uneven. It's hard to do when you're around the corner there. Now that number tells me how many of those equal shares I need to shade in. So that number is 1, so I'm only going to shade in one of those halves. 1/2. D says 2/4. So I'm looking at that word fourths, and I'm automatically going to break my circle or partition my circle into 4 equal shares. Now that number says shade in 2. So 1, 2. 2/4. E says 2/3. So the first thing I'm looking at is the word thirds. Thirds tells you 3 equal shares. So I want to split this up into 3. You do that by drawing 2 lines in your rectangle. Try your very best to make sure they're equal. That number tells you how many to shade in. 1, 2. So I shaded in 2. That's the fraction 2/3. F says 2/2. So once again, I'm looking at that word halves. Halves tells you what? 2 equal shares. So I'm going to draw my line straight down the middle. Now that number tells you how many to color in. Do 1 and 2. That is the fraction 2/2, and 2/2 is the same thing as 1/2. G says 3/4. Fourths means what? 4 equal shares. So I'm going to do down and across. Now that number is 3. You want to fill in or shade in 3. 1, 2, 3. You can shade in any 3 you want to as long as they're 3. H says 3/3. There's that word thirds again. Thirds means what? 3 equal shares. So I'm going to make 1, 2 lines going across here. And those are really squiggly, so I'm going to make sure I redo those. Make them a little neater. Everybody makes mistakes. And that number tells you you want to shade in 3. So I'll shade in 1, 2, and 3. Wow. I shaded in the entire rectangle. 3/3 is the same thing as 1/2. Now, I is a little tricky. I says 3/2. 3/2. And there's 2 squares there. So we're going to partition both of those squares. And we're going to partition them into halves because it says so. So we're going to make each square have 2 parts to it. So I'm going to partition this square into half, and I'm going to partition this square into half. So you just partition 2 squares into halves. Now, I want to shade in 3. 1, 2, 3. So look at this. I have this entire square. This whole square is shaded in. I have made one hole. So 1 hole. And now this down here is showing me what fraction. I've got 1 shaded in out of my half. So that's 1/2 here. So we call this fraction 1 whole and a half. So we say 1 1/2. Outstanding job. 5 says, split the pizza below so that Maria, Paul, Jose, and Mark each have an equal share. So we've got a group of friends here that all want to split this pizza, and it's got to be equal. So the very first thing that I'm thinking of is if I want to split a pizza up, I've got to think about how many people I'm sharing with. So let's count the people. We're sharing with Maria, Paul, Jose, and Mark. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 people. So we have got to split this pizza up amongst 4 people. It says label each student's share with his or her name. Okay, so I'm going to partition this pizza. I'm going to do it into 4 equal shares. There's my 4 equal shares. Now I'm going to label it with each person's name. And I'm just going to use M for Maria, P for Paul, J for Jose, and, Mark, I'm going to write M-A-R-K, so that way I don't mix it up with Maria. A says, what fraction of the pizza was eaten by each of the boys? Each is a key word here. They want to know what fraction did Paul eat? And maybe what fraction did Jose eat and Mark eat? Each of those boys only ate 1 share. Paul ate a share, Jose ate a share, and Mark ate a share. So each of the boys only ate 1 share. 1 out of the 4 equal shares. Because we split this pizza into fourths. So we would say that that is 1/4. They ate 1 out of the 4 slices. Part B says, what fraction of the pizza did the boys eat all together? So, Paul, Jose, and Mark. If I put all of those fourths together, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, we would have 1, 2, 3. Now I have 3 shaded in out of the 4 equal shares of pizza. So altogether, the boys ate 3/4. Make sure you double check all of your work. If you have any questions, please make sure you raise your hand and I will be around to ask you. Outstanding job. Raise your hand so I can look at your work. I can't wait to see it.